make it. We do love you, Liam. Glad to have you back. And another person we've not seen in a while is...
A long while.
Is the Melvinator.
Hi.
Hello. Gen Z's ambassador to the baby boomers. Right?
I've so missed this role.
Any instructions, any policy decisions from the Gen Z that the boomers need to know about? Have you decided that you really do like our music better than your own music?
Hey, I do listen to your music quite often, to be fair.
All
So,
right.
And I got some new records of your music for my uncle's collection. So
Records. She used the word records. I am impressed. Well, good to see you back, too.
You too.
Miss Claudia Fletcher,
How
how
was
are
your
you
day?
today?
I am
Looking lovely
grateful.
as always. Purple's a good color for you.
It's
or what
pink
is-
and I'm not lovely. Will you stop saying that?
Just receive
No,
compliments?
not that word.
Okay. Well, we'll work on that later.
Okay.
So, talking about behind the scenes, right? We've got a large part of our team are counselors,
Right.
right? And they're face to face with the public, but they're often not seen, right? It's not a public; it's a very private thing. They're behind doors, often all day long, dealing with people in the height of trouble and mess. And so you got to admire these folks, and we've got a couple of them here today talking about that ministry.
Right.
So why don't you introduce them, and let's see what we can learn from them today.
All right. So we have Henry Bruns and Joe, whose name I should have memorized.
Joe Leonard. Sorry.
Leonard.
Sorry.
It was there somewhere, but I have a lot of names in my head. So Joe Leonard, who is we're calling him our poster child, and so we'll find out later why he's a
that
Patrick
is.
Henry poster child. I think I'm the only one who probably calls him that. I don't think it's like widespread, but
Hopefully it stays that way.
yeah, we need to have our poster child ruin things, right? But they're part of something called the Hope Academy, and so we're excited to have them here, and we're going to jump in like we always do and find out what we call their whys. And so, Henry, we'll start with you and hear a little bit about why the Vision 30 space, why working at Patrick Henry Family Services resonates with you. Why is this something that you want to do and something that you enjoy?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. For me, my why, I look back on like my upbringing, this simple space of a farm in North Dakota, and like looking back on my life, and I tell a lot of people a lot of times my life has been pretty cushy. There haven't been a lot of there have been some painful and some hard things, but as a counselor, like when I get the opportunity to sit with people, as counselors, we don't want to get into the comparison game, but there's also this reality of I haven't had a lot of those experiences, and so in high school, I remember just a very clear sense of you take what you've been blessed with and you be there for other people, and so I actually started out in my undergrad in electrical engineering, and then made the switch over to counseling, which
That's
makes
quite a switch.
zero
That's a big
sense.
jump, isn't it?
Yeah. And so once I did that, it's like it's very clear that is the heart and personality that the Lord has given me. My wife and I have been married for 13 years. We have our daughter just turned 8 in October. We adopted her at birth, and our son just turned 2 this last August, and we finalized his adoption this last June. And so, we have been blessed immensely by the grace and goodness of God, and we want to take that and apply it elsewhere.
So this is a really random question, but as a resident of North Dakota, do you miss Taco John's?
I really appreciate that question. Like the last time I went back, we drove by one. I'm like, wow, Taco John's. So
Did you stop though?
no, because it was closed. Oh, I don't know how many are left.
Yes, as someone from that part of the country, it's one of the things that I miss. And when we go back, I always have to have some potato olays.
I miss Culver's.
Oh, yes, and Culver's. Culver's, those are the 2 meals I have to have regardless of what diet I'm on whenever I go back home, because there's just something about them you can't get down here.
Moving
Oh,
along.
shush,
Moving along.
That was an important question. All right,
Now
Joe
I know where I'm
Leonard.
going if I ever go to
Yes,
North Dakota.
both
Oh, yeah.
of those things. Or Minnesota or Wisconsin. You don't have to go all the way to North Dakota,
Well,
where no one lives. Okay. All right, back to seriousness. Joe Leonard, tell us about your why.
So I was thinking about this because Henry had sent just a little bit about what we were talking about, but kind of where he started back when I was young. I think something that I've always looked at in Scripture, even from a young age, is always looking at the perspective that people are looking from. And 2 examples, Peter walking on the water with Jesus, and when his perspective was on Christ, he was walking when it went down. He was sinking, and then even, Stephen, when he was getting stoned, my eyes would have, oh my, how, but his eyes went up.
Wow.
And so my why really revolves around like that idea of perspective. You go back to the Old Testament, and you see as the Israelites were going into the Promised Land, they were right there, and when they looked at the land before them and they saw the giants, their eyes didn't go up. Their eyes went inward and said, they're much bigger than us. And Joshua and Caleb, their eyes went up, and they said, I want to see God squash these people. And so I've always been really fascinated by that, by the perspective that you're looking through, and the eyes that you're seeing the world. And you see God with those people in Israel. In Hebrews he talks about that their eyes were not up, right? Their eyes were here.
Yeah.
They're I think there's 3 perspectives, and you can have up, out, and in, where you can be looking. And I've just it's so cool that I'm able to sit with people and to see their perspective, to almost enter into their world when you sit with someone. And so my why really revolves around being able to enter into those perspectives with them, and then also begin exploring with them, and looking out and looking up, and just begin asking questions or noticing things in their story and touching on them with, as you're talking with them. So that's really the why there. And kind of like Henry was saying, it's been an incredible journey even in my life. And now I'm married for 2 years, and my wife Jenna, and we have 2 dogs and everything. And it's been fun to go through my life and see what God's doing in my life, but then being able to step into someone else's world, and hear their story and help them explore that and begin to almost broaden that perspective and see the world around them, and then with hopes of having those eyes continue to go up, and seeing that journey is amazing. So
What a beautiful way to describe that. I feel like I just had a devotional today. That will preach, brother. That will preach.
amen.
So I think people probably are wanting to know why Joe is the poster child. So Henry, tell us a little bit about the vision that we had for the Academy, why we started it, and why Joe fits in as our first poster child of what we were planning to do.
Yeah. Well, Hope Academy. So the premise is we are here to intentionally train counselors. And when we think about Vision 30, we want every child supported, by a faithful community and in a loving and a safe home. And we talk about as an organization, we want to lead the charge, to confront the reasons why foster care exists. So Hope Academy, when new counselors come in, we believe that if hope, healing, and restoration is going to take place in a home, then we need to have excellent training for our counselors so that they can do that well. And that is the kind of core of Hope Academy. Originally, it was set up because we were going to work with resident counselors. So resident counselors, they have their master's degree, they're working towards their license. And we quickly found out that we need to actually change what we're doing and really focus on working with graduate students who are in their master's
Went
program.
upstream and
Yeah. And so, we started that process May of 2022. And so we did have 2 interns join us right away that summer, but Joe and a couple of others started with us in the fall of 2022 for their first experience in their graduate program. So Joe came as early as you can come as a counselor in training, and has stayed with us since he graduated here in August, and then stuck with us into his residency.
Is that called a practicum?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the first experience, yeah.
That really is the first experience out. Yeah.
So practicum, internship, residency.
Yep.
And you know that if you're going to be a true poster child, once you finally have your license, then you're going to be a licensed therapist.
Right,
with us, right? Like, that's the plan. So if you don't
yeah,
want to
yeah.
lose your poster child
Status.
title,
Keep going.
you have to
to stay.
you have to stay once you're done with your license.
I think after today, I'm going to get a poster and put it in Hope Academy and just put his face
Yes,
up
there
there. on
you
one of the walls.
go.
Yeah. Let's do
Be
that.
like Joe.
Well, if it comes down, you know who took it down. So.
And I think part of the core of what we were thinking with the academy, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this idea that those kind of therapists that aren't trained like this, it's very difficult. And as an adoptive parent, trying to find a therapist that had the tools that they needed to deal with childhood trauma, to deal with attachment issues, to deal with fetal alcohol, and those kind of things that are in a specific space, to find people who could do that is super tricky. And so the idea of the academy is let's not try to find people that already have that stuff. Let's find people that don't, but then equip them so that even if they don't stay with us, there's more options in our community for people who need that kind of thing. That the people that we work with typically with Vision 30 clients are people who need that kind of support.
But as a Christian organization, it was also important for us, right, to have that faith element,
Yeah.
right? And so this gives you an earlier chance, right, to have some influence in that perspective, providing mental health services, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not just, because I know you're particularly keen on having evidence-based
Yeah.
practice, professionally, driven practice, but it's also important that it's faith-driven, right? You're just explaining that your faith has really given you a framework for coming into this space. It means a lot to you, right? For those who may not understand that space, how does one who has a strong faith like you deal with folks who don't have that? There are folks in the community who might think maybe you could strong arm people, or right? So how do you give them the space to explore that or not explore that as part of their healing?
Yeah.
You gotta,
Well, I kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier. What's so cool about when I think of who God is and who God's created us to be, the place to be where we are most thriving, right, is to be in a place of looking up and seeing God. And when I think of sin, sin really turns those eyes inward, and you see people who, if they're so inward, right, they become exclusive and they start to isolate themselves. And so when I think of Christianity, I think of Christianity as being taking those eyes from being fully inward to fully upward. And everyone's different along those journey. And you think of even people who don't even know the Lord and have no interest. To be outward focused is healthy for everyone. And so when you think about that space, encouraging and walking with people to begin broadening that perspective is, even if it's not directly correlated to you have to trusting in Christ, that is still amazing for them. But the goal is not that doesn't stop there though.
right.
Continues
It's a
to
healthy
play.
place for everybody to
Yeah.
be. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, good question. Good answer. You have a question before we go to a break, or?
No, I figured that's where we were at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah, so let's take a little break and see one partnership we have that's helping us provide this service.
That's good.
Hi, what can I get started for you?
Hey, what is that flyer for?
Coffee and Counseling is a new partnership by Hill City Donuts, Mission House Coffee, and Hope Academy for Counselor Excellence to help make counseling more accessible for people in Lynchburg.
At any of these 3 locations, you can start a punch card that can be punched with a minimum $5 purchase and redeemed at the one of your choosing. A filled punch card can be redeemed for a free non-bottled drink valued up to $7 at Mission House Coffee, 2 free donuts at Hill City Donuts, or a free counseling session at Hope Academy. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
the Melvinator doing that.
It was.
Like she'll look back that when she's famous and has her star on the Hollywood Boulevard, she'll say, I got my start there in that commercial.
Okay.
That's a pretty cool partnership, right? How did that come about?
Yeah, props to our marketing team. We were able to sit down and just have a conversation. Hope Academy has the flexibility because of the way that we're structured to really meet people where they're at. And so in conversations with our marketing team, just talked about, is there a way to partner with different businesses, organizations that maybe you wouldn't typically think of to make something happen. And Emmeline with Hill City Donuts and Tommy with Mission House Coffee are just incredible people. It all came together and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's innovation.
That is innovation. The whole thing, the Academy's innovation, this partnership with business, but they also obviously have a faith perspective on it. Because we recognize Vision 30 is not going to happen. We're not going to keep kids safe if we're not in the mental health area, right? And since COVID, we've particularly seen a lot of families struggling, a lot of kids struggling. The school system's feeling it just about everywhere you go that deal with children and families, you see it. And so how do you expand that? It's just really hard because it takes resources, it takes funds to do this. And this is one really cool way to bring some resources in there. So kudos to them for that.
So innovation.
Innovation. It's pretty important. It's a big thing of what we're doing. Vision 30 is not going to happen without some innovation. We've got to think outside of the traditional space to make this happen, and Hope Academy's doing that. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. So what is innovative about Hope Academy? What makes it different than the resident experience, for example, for somebody else that's doing their residency somewhere else? What's different about it?
Yeah, from my perspective, looking back on my residency, it's difficult to even just have an outpatient clinic. Like, it's difficult to even just make that work. And so then for someone to be like, yes, I'm going to be a supervisor for somebody else, like a resident can sometimes be like an awkward third wheel of sorts. They'll get clinical experience, but it's hard to open a practice and then still devote intentional supervision to them. So we do consistent weekly supervision. I mean, over the last year, maybe we missed a week or two because of sickness or being out of town. But yeah, you're graduated. They already gave you your degree. But like that isn't going to be missed. That is a big part of it. Hope Academy has audio and video recording. And what I've just really been reflecting on over the last 3 or 4 months is I get a front row seat to see things that nobody else gets to see because I'm doing weekly supervision with them. I see what's happening in a counseling room. And it is beautiful. And so that allows me to give really intentional feedback. And if they're experiencing a client a certain way, we can process through that in ways that like self-report, or if we don't have audio and video recording, we can't do that. So because we have graduate students, they are considered volunteers in our organization, so we can offer free or very low-cost counseling. So if someone doesn't have insurance or they can't afford it, we can do that here in Lynchburg and Bedford and Appomattox.
My understanding is one of the innovations is that you front load the supervision as opposed to traditional, right, where it spreads it out. But counselors really need a lot in the beginning, right? So tell us, how is that working?
Yeah, so we've got 5 resident counselors now, and at minimum, we want like a 1-to-10 ratio, because for someone to get their license, that's effectively what they have to end up with. And a lot of times, someone will have their hours with clients, but they'll be really short on supervision just because of some of those things I talked about. So yeah, we offer, I just started offering some group supervision. They have weekly supervision with their supervisors. So we are very intentional to make sure they get that 1-to-10 ratio.
So how's your experience been with that?
Yeah,
Is it working?
well,
Is the idea actually panning out the way we hope?
What's cool about I got two perspectives when I was with Henry and with Hope Academy, because not only was I getting my own experience there, but then I was also going back to school, right? And you sit with other practicum students who are at other sites, and you hear their experiences at other places. And I have always felt immensely blessed being with Hope Academy, because the intentionality and the humility. I remember when I first met Henry. There's a lot I could say, but and his intentionality of saying, I also want to be growing, and I want to be growing as a supervisor to be as most effective as I possibly can, and continue to be growing to be more beneficial to those I'm supervising. And so he was always asking for feedback as well, or open to it. Let that door stay open for feedback. And so that combination of just humility, but then also the intentionality is what made my experience really great, and has also kept me coming back and wanting to continue with Hope Academy. But a question for you is, it's really cool to see this organization be so intentional with this space and provide this space, and it's been a blessing to me. What's really been it for the head of Patrick Henry to say this is something we want to invest in?
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations for being the first guest to ask a question. We always encourage that. Joe decided he was going to be, so
Poster child once
the poster
again.
child once again.
I take it back.
Yeah. So when I came in 2010, Hope for Tomorrow was already here. It started around 2009, but it was kind of small, almost a kind of an appendix to the rest of the organization. And I always felt it was the key to who we were serving, but also a key to the health and the future of us as an organization. Having trauma myself, and even though in 2010 I didn't know a lot about childhood trauma because it was early on, right? But I lived in a family that had a lot of dysfunction and a lot of mental health issues. And I just knew that if we're going to have any chance of having an impact on lives of children and families, is mental health's got to be part of that. As far as I know, my mother never went to counseling. I don't know if it was because she couldn't afford it, didn't see it as an option, had social stigma about it. But I know she needed that. And I also know that I needed that early on. But it was a different time back then, and I'm glad as a society we've become more accepting of folks getting mental health, right? There used to be a stigma about it. And I think there may be still work to do in that area. But we're just not going to solve the problem. It's a huge, huge problem. And so the Academy is just one way of trying to supersize this effort towards mental health. But there's an expense behind it. And that's the hardest nut to crack in this whole thing. How do you provide these services to folks who need it the most, who often are those who can't afford it, right? They can afford it the least. That's what we're trying to figure out all the time, isn't it,
Yeah.
Claudia?
Yeah. I have a question I didn't prepare you for, Joe. But
Oh, boy.
I'm sure you'll be all right. Go back to your first, as you're preparing for your first real counseling session, because I think that I have a master's in counseling, which pretty much proved I should not be a therapist. That's what my master's taught me. And if people who know me well know that I'm Bob Newhart, stop it. That would be my style. That video. But the intimidation of even practicing your first time. Can you remember what that looked like, and then talk a little bit about how that supervision is so important as you grow as a counselor?
Yeah, well, first of all, the first part, the most scary part with my first session is not the counseling part, it's the administrative part.
Oh,
because when you walk in, you're like, oh, what paperwork do I need to bring up? Like, what do I need to get signed? What do I need to say? And so that's really the most intimidating part of that first session.
For your personality.
But maybe. It was, but it's like intimidating because you're like, did I miss anything that needs to be done this first session? And again, that's something that I've been really thankful for. Being with Henry is the fact that he is there and present and not absent, like some people can be. But what was the second part of your question?
How does the supervision at Hope Academy help to those new counselors get through those first few sessions?
Yeah, and so what has been so cool about Hope Academy too, again, is and I wish that this was just standardized for counseling in general, is to meet with other people and talk about your experiences. You don't have to bring up names, but what you're doing and what you're talking about. Because what I found most beneficial being at Hope Academy is being able to bounce ideas off of someone else, being able to hear another person's perspective, and like there have been so many times. One of Henry's biggest things is, when he's talking about a client or with a client even, is what's the risk, right? That's his big thing. What's the risk? And being able to even learn that perspective when you see someone who's struggling with something and they can't do something that they really want to do, that simple question of, okay, well, what's the risk if you do that? And just being in an environment with someone else where you are able to bounce ideas off of someone has been the most amazing help and probably the biggest thing that I've taken away from supervision.
And I think that when you hear counseling, how hard can it be to just sit and listen to people all day?
Oh, it's hard.
But really hard, because I think the temptation is to feel almost like your response to them could be a life saver or a life end. I mean, like there's a whole lot of emotional responsibility that comes with being in that room with people. So
I told you guys this was going to go by fast, and here we are coming to the end. Yeah. And Henry, you brought some pictures. Because one of the innovative things you guys are doing is play therapy. Yeah. So why don't you introduce that, and Liam will put those photos up on.
That'd be great. The yeah. So in the area, there are 7 registered play therapists in Lynchburg. There's 1 in Bedford and 0 in the other 3 surrounding counties. So. So when I saw that, we had applied for some grants and graciously received some grants. So we put together a play therapy room, and I have 3 pictures of our play therapy room. That's our sand tray.
That looks fun. I could spend some time there.
It's across from my office, and it's honestly hard to not just go in there and not do my job. But I have not done that yet. And that's our little puppet stage. And so we have Joe is one of our resident clinicians working towards play therapy certification, along with Amanda Clark. And so we have 2 right now. But we do have staff that will go in there, and even though they're not providing play therapy per se, we call that attachment-based interventions. And so we've got other counselors that go in there and they use these puppets, and it's just the most beautiful thing what happens with a child when they're able to process through things. And we didn't have that opportunity last year. This was just put together here in September, October. So we've started doing that as part of just that innovative practice, wanting to be a place where if we're going to be training counselors, let's train them to be able to be with children who wouldn't benefit from traditional talk therapy.
Was there one more picture of that?
I think there was maybe a flyer of
let's show the flyer
for services.
Yeah, let's show the flyer.
And so we partnering with DSS, offering services. We've reached out to Lynchburg City Schools, and there's just a whole bunch of partnerships, and we'd be honored to be able to serve the children and youth of Lynchburg and the surrounding communities.
Well, in our remaining minute, Henry, look at the camera and tell the folks what you need in order to continue this great work that you're doing.
Yeah. I think sometimes it can be seen as a cliche of sorts, but definitely prayer. Really appreciated, Joe's comment about, humility. I think, we had a chance to just briefly chat yesterday, and I love the word capacity that you would use this last year with our staff. And it's so Hope Academy has a capacity, and so prayer for wisdom and discernment for what that capacity is, how to make sure we don't stray from that vision, but also resources, whether it be financial. I can't have volunteers other than the volunteers that are counselors in training, so it's a little bit different than the rest of the organization, but financial resources to allow us to continue to provide free or very low-cost counseling services to the community.
So if somebody is interested in counseling or interested in being part of Hope Academy for their training, how do they contact you?
Yeah. The website will probably be the best bet. On our Hope for Tomorrow counseling webpage, there's a link for Hope Academy, and there's a link for prospective counselors. And so those that would be interested, it includes information about who we are, and then also links to the applications.
That's wonderful. Any last insight from you?
No, I think we're over time. I can't say anything.
No, we're actually right on time because I'm in charge of the time.
Because I can't see the clock. Otherwise, I'd be in charge of the time.
That's why you don't see the clock. Well, that's why I see the clock.
You should like to be in charge.
I do.
You have that kind of ego, don't you?
As long as you allow me, I will stay in charge. Hey, thanks for joining. I was blessed today. I hope that you were too. And so we'll see you next week on Community Connection.
Nobody gets to choose their family. If a person is fortunate enough to be born into a healthy family, then life can be much like floating down a smooth, gentle river in the summertime. But an unhealthy family is like a dangerous river, filled with rocks, debris, and fast-moving water. This river swiftly leads to the steep waterfall of adulthood, tragically forming a new river of dysfunction. Even if you aren't born into an unhealthy river, there are many streams that cause a person to get there. But there is only one way to get out, and that is through a meaningful relationship. Across our region, there are many agencies, churches, and families who are devoted to helping children escape from unhealthy rivers. Some feel their role is to wade in and rescue children. They foster, adopt, or provide safe families. Others stand by the river and support the rescuers by providing what they need. Still, others are upstream and stand in the gap to keep children from ending up in the negative situations. At Patrick Henry Family Services, we see ourselves as having an additional role. We are running up and down the shores of the unhealthy river, screaming, "Can't you see the children in the water? You have to do something." Vision 30 is a 10-year initiative. By 2030, we envision a region where all children are safe in their own family, or with caregivers who are supported by a local faith community. So, where do you stand at the river? Are you upstream, keeping families together and strong by standing in the gap? Are you in the river, directly impacting children? Are you on the shore, providing support for the brave folks who have entered the river? Or are you just passing by without noticing? No matter who you are, come down to the river with us. Let us help you find your place. Not only will lives be changed, but you will never be the same.